interfacing lines and screen lines. So basically, it's true to understand how to use the mastering communication in your body. That's a correlation system of travel that balances the location center of everything and emptiness inside the system. But you also have to identify the outer sideline condition with the outer shell, which is all communication of solid matter. So that comes in the mind over matter over pi. Now that's a conceptual setting, how you motivate your system and become the virtual reality of your own reality. That's already set in design. Let me say that again. Already set in design. Okay? Let that sink in. Let that sink in. And then you ask yourself, how do you bring things in? How is everything created? In the mind, guys. That's a concept that we have to understand in that position. And the next thing you're going to ask, well, how is it all created? Through its imagination. Well, how is it created through its imagination? Through the oversoul. How is it created through the oversoul? Through space and time. Well, how is it created through space and time? And so on, and so on, and so on. You're always going to be asking yourself questions. Now, there's nothing wrong with knowing the questions, knowing that you already know the answers to. So that puts the body in the conception of alignment. It all has to identify the oversoul. It's just itself. Okay? Now, if it identifies itself and knows how to use itself in modification and how to bring things in, is all levels of your construct, of your blueprint, of your divine, of your divinity, of your light through the mind of travel. That is a conception of the mind of inception itself. Copy that. So, all you guys have to start identifying is what to do with the body inside. But the body's not there until you bring it in. The mind is not even there until you bring it in. See, we live in a virtual reality of nothing but the emptiness of no memory. Okay, and that processes our systems that we are just waking up to ourselves. And that identifies the me, myself, and I. That doesn't exist until you actually bring everything in. And how you bring things in determines what happens next. Now you have to be totally specific how you bring a simulator to a simulation. You have to have patience and convergence and balance inside the mind of that patience. And this where it comes into the mind over matter. Matter of mass, mass over mass, or anything in that position over lines of pi. When you're bringing in something, you have to have patience, right? Perseverance, never give up. Your preference is how you bring things in through a simulator into a simulation. Now, these things take time. That doesn't mean it's going to be specifically there in 2 minutes. Don't have expectations looking at your watch and say, hey, where is my money? No. You've already received it. You have to identify it. That's already created inside of you through infrastructure. Your pyramid is inside you, but you are the pyramid itself. Now, understand the template and understand the tablet is to understand how to see yourself and set position of space and time through operation. You guys are your own infrastructure, but understanding how to live that and understand that is inside of you through infrastructure. Okay, your own construct, your own divine, your own contract, your own blueprint. Okay? So it gets a lot more easier how you see things, how to operate yourself. Because we live in operations inside of Earth. We are the Earth. It's a conceptual setting, which is everything of whole. A spin. Spins on its own. So it looks like it's going backwards. It's not. It's going in the same direction. Nothing's going back until you say back. Nothing's going forward until you say forward. It's your determination setting, how you process, how you use your mind in collaboration, of partnership, of interfacing. So if you want this to go back, okay, even though I'm going forward, it's going back. See? If I want it to go forward, it's going to go forward. If I want it to go back, you'll see it going back. If you want to see it going forward and back, it goes forward and back at the same time. So it's all specifications and it's stepping stones that you get in position. You don't go up to the steps until you've already been up the steps. Okay? So that's just a circle line and rotation lines and grounds. Just a basic location system and travel. It's all specification system. So let's get into correlation lines and calculation. Track communication lines convergence. All right, so there's a straight line. Okay, there's a straight line traveling through it, right? Yeah, da 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 da, dancing, 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 right? Okay, so it can't go further until you draw that straight line. Okay, so keep going, keep going, keep going, and then here goes. Uh-oh, it can't move forward. So what is it looking at? It's looking at this. No, 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 no. Okay, that's on you, right? So it can't move forward, all right? Until you create that straight line. Okay. Now, once you create this straight line, okay. Oh, look at that, disappeared. The top one disappeared. Okay, so now it's moving forward, right? In that position. Okay, so now it's gone through pi because you created a straight line so it can cross. If you don't, in position, it falls. All right. So it's a true understanding of how you come into the modification, how to operate the visible location setting to virtual reality of yourself inside position operation calculation. It helps you to really understand that you have a mind controlling system, but you have to look at everything of its own controlling system. Okay? But you have to coordinate and set position of a simulator turns into a simulation. Okay? So whatever you bring in, okay, it needs its environment. It needs its environment, guys. Okay? So, for example, let's get a track communication lines convergence system, all right? So let's say you get an image, okay, in that position, alpha setting. Okay, you bring in a fish, right? But a fish needs a tank, all right? So let's say you just bring in the water, okay? Okay, what's the fish doing? Trying to figure out what you're doing. Goes here, goes there, goes back up that way, right? Okay, it's looking at you. Where's the tank? Okay, so it needs a tank. Okay, now it can go in the water, right? And swim. Okay, and this is how you control your minds in your simulation. Okay, so now it's inside the water, right? So, and again, okay, it comes up for food. Okay, it's that position of traction. Okay, so it builds its environment, it looks around, it sees the longitude and latitude of its mass in set position of where it is, and it starts living in its environment of what you created through sim in set position. Okay? So this is just basic stuff. Basic, how to operate your system, but you can't have any expectation. Because if you have expectation, you're not going to see it in your mind, even though you created it. Okay, you can't have any expectation until you understand no expectation. No is expectation, expectation, no expectation. Either way, it's direct and redirect. But how you get specific in your mind is breaking things down in coordinates of longitude and latitude. Okay, they're all traveling together, right? They're still there, right? Okay, still there, right? Travel. Okay, bring it back to failsafe, back home. That's where they are position. Now you can add equation, right? Setting, 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 sequence, setting, setting. Okay, travels all together, sees lines of making location system, alpha calculates setting grounds, flux over line, all corresponds and calculates screen locations. Travels all together, calculates modified, back to failsafe. That's where it wants to be in travel. Okay, it doesn't want to be this. It wants to be here. Okay, that's where it's left off of its intelligence, and you have to modify that in the lines of coordination. It's longitude and latitude. Now it wants to be this. Now it wants to be this, this, and that. Okay, and then you continue on. If not, you change the formation system. Either it'll disappear or reappear back in setting. Okay, so it wants to be there. So I'm showing you exactly how you connect to consciousness of everything of its awareness. It already identifies you already through instructions. Okay, so as it comes in line specification system, we get you guys your planetary alignments. Okay, so line, cross line signals. 1 measured line scales, flux over 3 over travel. Travel's point lines of graph, 13.9 indicates lines. Position of pi, sent lines, travel calculation, screen locations. Change formation lines, operation sequence. Correlation lines of travel calculation, in sent line conditions. Convergence lines, pi over generation, pi over screen. Calculate modified grounds. Operation line sequence. Pattern line centers, operation line, course centers, and direct lines of solar system. Inset calculation of screen lines, adaptation of force. Temperature reading, process lines, barometer, thermometer, log piece, and sending calculation of travel. It says coordinates of travel communications. Crossing angles, flex over line, balance lines, location setting, fortitude, location setting, and travel. Directing grounds, lines of sequence. Travels and point lines of graph. Time share, time calculation times pi. Time measure, line condition setting. Also indication lines, bending space. And 4 set lines of calculation. Crossing angles, inside rotation, and travels in point lines of black hole. Centric communication lines of ground, set course centers, fly in the charts. Course centers, XD 1001. Crossing indication lines of 4 centers of travel, directing lines, and position lines of powers, line generation lines of screen. Powers over lines, travels point lines of graph, calculation screen location. Setting correlation, setting, travel, communication, convergence, all through setting. Operation line sequence, downshift lines of anomaly. Operation lines for calculation screen locations. Solar flare, directing ground center, circulation lines, and atom line rotation lines of surface and travel. Correlates calculation screen lines, adaptation of flux. Process communication inside, triangulation, all line course centers of travel communication. Directing online centers. Your simulation is already set up. There's nothing for you to do. All right. So now you can basically come in the shadow wave and set lines of travel, or you can coordinate communication change of configuration lines of course centers to calculate screen lines to set its position in lines of calculation. It's amazing when you understand that your simulation is already done, guys. So everything that you draw is set lines of communication to its travel. Let's get position to red. Okay, you bring it on the simulation game. Okay. Okay, you brought that in, but that's you observing what you brought in. Okay, see how the simulation's already made up? Let's bring it up line settings. Look at all that bandwidth you can go in that position. So now you can move over to line centers, travel point lines of graph. This is already set up in travel. Okay, look at that. Look at all the shapes, right? All right, so there's a lot of things you can do through platform of position location, laser lines, of course, centers of TV receptor. TV receptor, laser lines, and communication lines of TV. Ground centers in sequence, ground centers in flux location setting. Oh, resistor coming in, right? Okay, 2 line centers of resistors over pi, overline cross line conditions, 3 lines of 4 lines of signal location setting, convergence system of travel. Oh no. Out signals, location lines of calculation, screen locations. Now, all I'm doing is setting up line screens adaptation at different matrix of travel. Okay, your simulations are already set up. I told you that before. So you're just recognizing that and set lines of screen and configuration system of travel. All through setting, all through operation. Okay, but remember, you always have an observer of you. Okay, seeing everything's good, everything's in set position. That's you observing everything that you're doing. Then you move on to the next and set lines of travel. But look at all the shapes already set up in the sim. What's below, what's above. Okay, so you can change the graph lines. Let's go to planetary line setting sequence. Team line centers, line course centers, put them in a planetary line center location lines of convergence system off the travel, direct lines of memory core course centers, get in their gifts, process lines of grounds, lines of tilt line, position formation lines of travel. Calculate screen lines, adaptation and travel. All right, so calculate screen locations. 1/3 line, 1 treasury. All right, so calculation screen locations and convergence system lines, signals, process lines, indication lines of 3 centers, 4 lines of travel communications. Directing online center, on sequence, on pi. Travels and point lines of graph, course centers of calculation. Inside calculation screen lines, adaptation of force setting. Look at this. Whoa. So we have to indicate position location where it comes into phase recognition. Phase recognition. All right. Correlate calculation, pixelation grounds, set course centers, inside rotation. Okay. Set course centers, timeline, frame lines, inside location, line condition setting, travel. Okay. Light signals of all course centers, directing ground centers, set position lines of calculation. Changing energetic graph, correlation lines and coloration lines of patterns, direct lines of grounds, offline, inside rotation lines of screen. Whoa, look at that. See how it travels? Cross line condition setting and convergence. So everything that goes line setting is crossing stream. Okay, that's where you see it from here, but you can't see it from there, but you see it from the other side, right? But see that laser door? That's what it goes through, right? Right? Can't see it till you see the other side, right? So, and you change the shape too and set position in different directions, but it's constantly going trap. And then you see the indications. There's the laser. Right? See that? Right there. Okay? Everything's a door line represent time frame. Okay? There's a door. Okay, there's a laser. There's the door. There's a laser. There's the door. Right? So I'm trying to get you to understand the bandwidth that you have in streaming. Right? Bring it in. There's your simulation. Boom. Right? So that's what you guys come into is bandwidth and streaming. So don't ever think that you can't do things in a position where your mind has trap line signals of location setting and it calculates screen locations. Because it's your bandwidth that you go through settings of flux. All right, so go through planetary lines over lines of centers and travels a point line course center to convergence system all through pi. Process that indication. Okay, clock in centers. Set sequence. Ground lines of flux. Process of indication. Travel point lines of graph. See, it's on itself, see? It's moving itself. So it indicates itself. It knows identifications of itself in modification. Process line direct centers, ground lines of sequence, ground lines of pi. Sets coordinates of communication setting of travel. Right? Travel of communication system and solar generation lines of light, set dimension lines of rotation. Okay? Add the equations. Okay, now, and that position lines solar system over travel. Okay? Because that overrides the set location lines of standby. Time frame. Clocking centers over travel communications into bending space. Okay, now we go through line signals, ground centers, line course centers, and convergence system of the setting of operation. 3 centers that calculates the screen location. Travels all together, right? Now, if I say opposite, it goes opposite. If I say go forward, it goes forward. So it doesn't matter me going this way, that way. It's my specification I do through my mind. I'm not doing it from here. I'm doing it from here. That connects here. Okay? So everything's in the mind 100% of the time. And 100% location is zero gravity. And that's where you start when you drive a car. You're at zero. 100% is zero, guys. And then you go through RPMs, through standard 5 in that position. So you got first gear, second gear, third gear, fourth gear, fifth gear, and now lines of all communication. Right? Okay. Clocking zeros over lines of course centers and platforms are all course centers of communication setting sets all calculations and screen lines adaptations of flux over lines and position lines of setting. Okay. Planetary alignments. Planets and alignment line screen location can be anything in convergence system all through travel, guys. Okay? But you're not being specific. Okay? It will not travel in your minds. So 100% is just the starting point. 100% is about you starting to run. When you're running, you're going through acceleration. Okay? And you're going through parallels and paradigms and polar shifts and compulsories. You're going through speed line. You're going through correlation lines of communication. You're going through interstellar mode, hyperdrive, central drive. Anything information setting comes in position lines of processing, going through an acceleration system into your particle acceleration setting to travel. So every time you change the position of schematics, it changes the convergence system of timelines of setting. Okay, so on center, on sequence, on pi, is set calculation. Okay? It's all working together, isn't it? They all work together in one setting. One clocking center of 0, but be specific in your minds. Okay? Know exactly what's going on in your system. It's already done through its calculation of travels and travel communication Oh, look at that, disappeared. You weren't allowed to see it. It's too fast. Let's do a Fibonacci roll and coarse calculation of Fibonacci. Now it's a set lines of sequence, ground centers, and set travel. Okay, this is a schematics of a Skynet. Very complicated stuff. This is all through a planetary line center. Okay, but you can also have clouds in, outside line, in rotation lines, and set lines of sequence. There's a cloud, right? In set line course centers and positions is the mothership. Setting in set lines of communication convergence set line calculation setting. Okay, in translucent. Now, remember, you can change translucent, transparency, or underlying conditions of thermal or X-ray, but you have to understand what you're bringing in through specifications, because you're not being specific. The mothership will come in its own system of its own system, okay, which you have no more control of. That's the alteration you brought in through the mothership. That's not good. Okay? All you're doing is balancing frequencies from one to another. That's all you're doing, and it's all lines of how you identify your emotional system that comes in your trifactors and set position location and coloration lines of patterns. Pattern recognition of strategy and understand how to codify your locations, understand how to see that through the binary, the arg location, your encryptions. Know exactly how to bring things in through your mind imagination and position location and specifications. If you're not being specific, it brings its own self in through color. And it takes over your system in travel. Right away in set position of operation. So you have no more control of what you're doing inside calculation. It's affecting your solar system. Because you weren't being in the mind, being specific, what you wanted to bring in. That's what you have to start identifying, because it has its own algorithm. You have to codify the things. You have to understand the codification system of travel. You have to understand the binary coordinates, calculate, modify. Understand the virtual line coordinates that convert into position, location, of travel. Directing in position alteration lines of egos, the characters, the position of the players that you bring inside location you're assuming that correlates to communication alteration lines of egos that you go through stories. You go through stories, running operation through stories, not looking at a story, not connecting to a story. You are a story, but how you see a story is through a story. So you can stop line position and transmission to create another story, and another story, and another story, and over and over and over and over and over again. But as you wake up, you're waking up to yourself. You're not waking up to a story. Because you're waking up to a story, you're still tethered to a story that's affecting your day, month, and year. Drawbacks of time frame is longitude and latitude, how we go through imaging and location settings all to travel. Directing ground centers, so and that line course centers, and that communication lines, back in setting, back in balance, back in operation line course centers, in their position locations, putting process of communication, turning the mothership and set lines of travels and set lines of space itself. Back online, back in sequence, back in panel. Booyah! Back to where you left off in configuration. Okay, now you move forward. Add in new frames of travel. Has a continuous force in position lines of balance. You're navigating your systems. Okay? So, yeah, that's right, exactly. Planetary alignment. But I'm just trying to get you guys to understand how you fortitude your location setting and being more specific what you're doing. Because if you're not being specific, you're bringing a character of a role that you have no control of. It's controlling its own system, and it's going to basically put you in confusion of your planetary alignment. You don't want to offline that setting, especially in direct online set lines of sequence. Okay, that's where it comes in provision locations when you're not doing understanding what you're doing through the drawings. So if you draw a straight line, you have to continue on or it can't go forward, right? So if you're not being what you're in position of balance, it creates its own anomaly. It creates its own planetary, creates its own solar system of its own setting if you don't take control. Now it's in control of you. So it takes over you, right? So setting position of you, setting positions above you, right? So transistor, resistor, okay? Set position receiver, okay? Set lines, course centers, and location system, and all those are resistor, transistor, okay? On top, squeeze, compulsory, right? So the resistors overlining the communication lines of its transistor, right? So it can't respond. It can't respond because it's squeezing the system, right? Okay, So that's what causes Quebec interference of its set lines of travel. So overline cross lines and takes over the set position location setting into combustion and location to its system. And you got position location in setting that's locked in system right now. Right? And that's what you don't want. You want to release the panels in position and setting. Okay? So it's a convergent system all through travel as a calculation system. Now it's created its own solar system because you did not take the time to create your own simulation, how you modify these in specifications. You didn't bring in your own coding system. You didn't bring in your own algorithm system. So it brings its own self. If you don't identify the space and time will identify you. That's the coding. That's the binary. Binaries come into setting, linked in chain, process lines of indication system. Change course centers, time frame, into earth line rotation lines of surface. So it resets course centers, locates setting and position of binaries. Travel direction timelines, elixir into all course centers of calculation system. Process indication online center on sequence line communication position lines of travel. Okay, so now it's taken everything over in lines of sequence because you couldn't modify your codification setting to your algorithms of your own system, of your own decisions, and your own choices. So that's what can happen in set position through its alteration of its ego. Okay? So that's important when you understand. You work together. So when you come in a straight line, okay, you create it, you modulate it, you motivate it, you get in the simulation system. Okay, you create that straight line. Okay, so it can walk to the other side, which is inside the system. Okay? That's all it is in travel. Okay? What you have to identify, it's already done through pi. Okay, so there you go. 3 versions of you and set lines of coordinates of balance. Okay? And then you travel through it. You travel all together. Right? That's why I like working with stick persons. It's very powerful stuff where I came into that. I told you guys about that. 5 lines of sequence locations where I had an align conceptual setting of a TV. Okay. And his name was Simon. Okay, and this is me. All right. Watching TV. Okay. So he pulled me in. He pulled me in, right? Into the TV. And there I am. Right there, trying to figure out what's going on. Okay? So it's all in your mind, imagination. And I started realizing that, and the things I like to do is going to take me places, climb the ladder with me and you. So it's really interesting how we formulate ourselves as inner children, directing what we watch and how we perceive things on TV of lacing lines of travel. It's that position of operation. Okay? Because it's all sonified how we come in that positional case of provision that puts all calculations screen lines adaptation of flux. Okay? Through harmonizations into travel. So getting that positional case known as side equals, you understand the provision lines of planetary alignments that process all angles and course centers of a communication setting at 4 lines of travel. Oh, what happened to the 4th? It disappeared. Where did it go? I got emotional. It disappears. Now, you got to put it back in the same place. It can't be off position because of offline it's sending to travel. Okay, now it's in balance. Now it's all working together in one line set locations at convergence. Going forward in a planetary alignment, in all line cross line angles and align communication is that position of balance. All together, all in sync with itself and with each other. You have to be modified of the consciousness, knowing exactly what's going on in provision, because if you don't identify these things, it disappears and creates its own anomaly of its own space and time, which means it creates its own Superman, which means it creates its own alteration of its egos, of Clark Kent, which means it creates its own body of its own conception, of its own configuration, going through a story. It doesn't see at a story, it sees where you are in frequency. So it can take you over through frequency that can take over your mind, imagination, and separate you through your alterations of your egos, which you have no more control of. It's that position, okay? There you go. No control. Now it's controlling you through algorithm of decisions and choices you make. Right? So that's what happens when things disappear, and then they reappear and they reform and recalculate and remodify inside your system, inside of you through infrastructure, changing your structure, changing your design, changing your thoughts, changing your angles, changing your action, changing your emotions, because you could not get specific in detail what you wanted to bring in through your own thoughts, your own thinkings, and your own actions of space and time in the VR system. It's all done through traction. Okay? So that's what you have to be modified through in settings. Set position travels all together. Bring it back to failsafe. Okay, you're good to go. Now you can add a frame, right? So you know exactly what happens now if things disappear. It reappears into its own timeline lineage, which is the opposite of everything in travel. Okay, planetary line, offline, online, center location, static convergence system, multi-calculations. Travels all together in set position. You're in the operation system. You are in the driver's seat. If you're not in the driver's seat, you're in the passenger seat. If you're not in the passenger seat, you're in the back seat. So what you want to be in set position and all travel on that course centers and that directions is this. You want to be in the back seat, okay? Okay, and nobody driving the car driving itself. So you're controlling everything inside and outside for projection. You're controlling the roads, okay? And this is you in the back seat, laying back in that position. You're just here controlling everything around your environments, all that positions, all in setting of seconds, minutes, and hours. You're controlling everything inside of you. You're modulating, you're space modulating, you're correlating, you're paneling, operation lines of sequence, controlling everything information system and process calculations, all through travels, all through the calculation setting in your sim. Okay, travels this way, which is very, very important. Everything is line state located to its system, all through contractions, and directing online centers of travel. Everything links its own case and system and calculation setting to its sim, right? But it's very powerful how we can change formation lines of time frame, all through all levels and set lines of communications, convergence system, all through travel, crossing angles, all position lines of travel, correlate the communication lines of high position lines of travel. This is a Skynet connected to a car and mechanism location setting in convergence system, all through calculations, all through travels, all through directions, all through locations in the sim. So you're in the back controlling everything through Skynet in a circulation of a clocking center, seconds, minutes, and hours. Okay? And it travels all together, all in one. So you're controlling everything through pattern, controlling everything in rotation, you're controlling everything in ground, you're controlling everything in powers, atmospheres, highways, modems, satellites, and towers. You're controlling everything in the simulation of laser line communication to a system, all through your solar system. And your solar system is right here in travel. Okay, right there in set position. Okay, and you have your planetary lines linked in chain in set lines of convergence, and your galaxy alignments in set rotation. Okay, so it's very powerful how you see that in all formation setting and grounds, powers and atmospheres. Okay, it's absolutely incredible. Everything you create is nothing of a simulation, but you have to set up a skyline grid, right? Because you have to set up the simulator, then you set up the simulation, right? And it all starts with triangulation, box frame. Okay? Your provision lines is 2 lines of cycles, 3 lines of center. Okay? Now you go from this setting to this setting to this setting to this setting. So all you're doing is spreading out communication. That's all you're doing. Nothing else, nothing more. Okay? And it travels all together. So you bring the triangulation out through bandwidths over pi. There's your pyramid. Okay? And then you bring out your flux because you need time capacitors, set position lines, setting grounds, and set lines of travel. Okay? Then you have to bring outline center location setting in position location of pyramid and set lines of travel. Astral projections, travels, calculations, and calculations, green locations. Coming to astral lines, astral connections, platforms over lines as travels, and 4 lines of secret location system and calculation. So everything you're creating is nothing but a simulator of design. It needs to have an environment And then you run the system, you press play. Now you're seeing what you've already done through all levels of observation. You like what you've done, you press play. And when you press play, it runs. There it is. There's the running sequence that you set up in your simulation and all through modification of space modulation. All set up in design. So that means you're the observer of everything you get in modification of. And it's all done through space modification, space modulation of your navigating to your navigation systems. Okay, so that's all you're doing. Okay, that's all you're doing. And when you do that, it's much easier to understand because you have to have a skyline. You need a grid, crystal grid, ground centers of sequence. Okay, you need a flux. You need 3 centers of measure. You need grounds, powers, and apertures to activate your system all through travel. Okay, you can have 2 line signals. You need the ground, powers, and apertures. That's 3 line settings of flux in set position, right? Because what you have to understand is you're creating a flux capacitor. Grounds, powers, and apertures, right? Then you come into this. There's the intelligence. Okay? Center course centers, directing and ground center course centers of travel. Okay? Then you light it up. Okay? And then you have 4 line sequence inside location, sending a light bulb. Right? So it's really amazing. And this comes in set position. The intelligence inside. The costume, the intelligence. The costume outside, the intelligence inside. Okay, you see it? That's why you understand the flux capacitor as grounds, powers, and apertures. Now that's time capacitor, body capacitor. Now I understand how to see that through volume. It gets you a better understanding how to see that in transit communication setting convergence. Planetary lines and center lines of sequence location lines, particle stream location setting, online panel, process lines, and mitigation system all through flux. Travels all together, all through rotation, right? So you're constantly just creating, guys. But you have to understand everything that you create is nothing of a simulator. It's set lines of Skynet. Everything's Skynet. Everything set up is Skynet. But you have to understand how to set it up in the VR system, okay? It's not just a webbing system, okay? It's everything that you set up. It's already set up for your system. So everything you draw is already done through its equations. And it doesn't matter how you do it or how you look at it in any way and form. You look inside, you see what you're creating is already done as a simulation, right? But setting lines of screens, you're adding equation now. You're changing information's lines of grounds, okay? XC1000s again, come in, make sure you know what you're doing. If not, it all disappears. You can't put something there if it's already set there because it confuses your future adaptation setting a cycle. It picks it up and disappears. Okay? It disappears. So to identify these things is to understand how to modify your system. And truly understand it's all done from inside line conditions of infrastructure. Processing that line communication setting gets you all lines how to balance out your planetary alignment because it's the infrastructure you are in position of is the empty space is now built itself inside is to identify the projection outside of solid matter. Now, once we interconnect the system and everything's construct inside our setting, which is nothing but empty space itself, okay, everything comes a video graphing screen. Now that position from the outside has to come out of the solid matter so it can be a full crystalline communication setting and travel. And that communication setting, then you start to understand what you've always been living in is nothing of that position, which is the emptiness of no memory of travel. Because you already have access of its travel. So it's memory to no memory to all memory you already have. That's all it is. But you have to liquefy it. You already know that already through crystalline and that positions. All right, so that, okay, basically it's not there. It just disappears. Okay, it just disappears. It's gone. It's erased through space and time. Okay, it's gone. It's just not there. But still there. It never left. And that's where we constantly keep living, is the nothing of everything of mass that puts us in all levels of formula equations of all calculation setting. Okay? Which is no memory. This supposition. Right? So you clean slate yourself every time you turn the page. Right? You're not turning the page and seeing another story. You're turning the page and there's nothing there. So you're creating new structure, new design, new division, new locations, new scriptures, new sacred geometries, anything in that position lines of travel. Okay, and positions to your book of information. Okay, your book of information. So every time you turn the page, it's empty. It's always been empty. That means you're always waking up to yourself. But you understand how to modulate yourself now. Because you're going through stories and ending stories and creating new stories in set positions. Especially when you come into your planetary alignments and travel. Okay? So we're good on that level. And that position lines of sequence location setting, calculation screen location setting. We'll be in classification A, level C, the process course standards in the Coliseum. Adios.